I'm going to tell you something most people don't want to hear. The reason you don't finish what you start isn't because you're weak, it's because you're using the wrong strategy. You rely on motivation, on a good moment, on energy that fades the second life punches back. And if you keep approaching your goals that way, you're going to keep repeating the same cycle. Start strong, slow down, quit quietly. I've watched men with more talent than me fall into that trap and never climb out. And the truth hit me in the final hours of Hell Week when my body was shaking uncontrollably, my vision closing in, and the Pacific felt like it was trying to drag me under. That was the moment an instructor leaned down and whispered, "This is the secret to finishing what you start." And he was right. What he told me next rewired my entire life. Before I tell you what that secret is, I need you to do something. Put your phone down, turn off your notifications. If you're scrolling TikTok while listening to this, click off. I mean it. If you can't give me 2 minutes of undivided attention, you're not ready for this. Consider this your first test. In the teams, we filtered men fast, not with pull ups, not with cold water, with focus. If you can't control your attention, you won't control your mission, period. So prove you can do the smallest form of discipline right now. Be here fully. Now, why should you even listen to me? I'm ex-Navy SEAL John. I spent over a decade in the world's most elite special operations force, where quitting wasn't an option and finishing wasn't a motivational idea. It was survival. Everything I'm about to tell you was forged in places where comfort didn't exist. Freezing surf torture, endless miles with boats on our heads, missions where one sloppy decision could cost a life. And I've watched regular guys just like you, transform completely when they applied these principles. No self-help fluff, no empty hype, a practical, battlefield-tested system for anyone who wants to rebuild their discipline from the inside out. If you give me 7 days of applying what I teach in this video, you will feel a shift. Not motivation, identity. You'll stop negotiating with your goals and start executing like someone who finishes what they start. Here's what we're doing today. I'm laying out the exact framework that pulled me out of that mud during Hell Week. The strategy has 3 phases, just like any mission. Target acquisition, where we define the real enemy, operational breakdowns, where we dismantle your goals into micro objectives, and sustained fire, the system that keeps you executing long after your feelings give out. This is the same structure we use before stepping into hostile environments because chaos only destroys the unprepared. If you want to stop breaking promises to yourself, this is the blueprint. Now I want you to engage. I want you to comment below with one thing: I'm all in. That's it. It's your verbal contract. In the teams, every mission started with acknowledgement. Consider this yours. And once you type it, don't back out. Now lock in. We're stepping into the cold. Let me take you back to the moment everything almost fell apart and the moment I learned the secret that changed my life forever. When people ask me what the hardest part of Buds was, they expect me to say the cold, the miles in the sand, or the sleep deprivation. But the truth is, the hardest enemy I ever faced wasn't out there in the ocean or on the grinder. It was inside my own head. And if you're honest with yourself, that's the same enemy you're fighting right now. The mind that quits early, the mind that negotiates, the mind that lies to you so convincingly that you think stopping is the logical choice. I didn't understand that at 18. I didn't understand it at 20. I didn't even understand it when I showed up at the gates of Bud-S thinking I was tougher than I was. I learned it the hard way, through failure, through embarrassment, through walking away from things I said I wanted. I remember being in high school and quitting my first long distance race halfway through, faking an ankle tweak so no one would judge me. I remember signing up for a community college class and dropping it after the second week because it felt overwhelming. Those little exits became a pattern. Nobody yelled at me, nobody punished me, nobody held me accountable. Every time I quit, the world stayed quiet. And that silence is how quitting becomes a habit because it feels safe. It feels reasonable. It feels like self-protection. But you and I both know what it really is: comfort dressed up as logic. By the time I hit Hell Week, that old habit tried to crawl back out of me. I could feel the negotiations starting. You're too cold. Your legs are locking up. You've proven enough. Nobody would blame you. That voice doesn't shout. It whispers. And in those dark hours when your body is shaking and your brain is fogging over, that whisper sounds like truth. But what I didn't know yet, and what every SEAL eventually learns, is that your mind hits the panic button long before your body is anywhere near real failure. That's where the 40% rule comes in. When your mind says you're done, you're usually only 40% of the way through your actual capacity. 40%. Think about what that means. You've barely scratched the surface by the time you're ready to quit. There's biology behind it too, not warrior stuff, human stuff. Your brain has a built-in comfort bias. Its job is survival, not success. It wants you warm, fed, rested, safe. So the second you push into discomfort, whether it's physical pain or emotional stress, your brain triggers warning systems: fear, doubt, fatigue, none of them mean you're actually in danger. They just mean you're leaving your comfort zone. And your brain hates that because it can't predict what comes next. That's why you feel exhausted long before your muscles truly fail. That's why fear shows up even when nothing is physically threatening you. That's why your mind starts negotiating the moment things get hard. Your brain isn't trying to destroy you, it's trying to protect you. But growth isn't safe, and greatness definitely isn't. Flash forward to a moment during Hell Week. My team was carrying a log across the beach, and I slipped, dropping to one knee. The old me, the kid who faked injuries, who backed out quietly, showed up again. My mind fired off the same script it had used on me for years. You can't keep going, just quit. It'll be over. And for a few seconds, I almost listened. But Buds has a way of stripping the lies out of you. One of my boat crew guys yelled at me to get up, and something shifted. I realized I wasn't actually done. I was tired, cold, exhausted, but not finished. The difference between quitting and continuing wasn't ability, it was decision. That's when the truth finally clicked for me. The first battle is always internal. If you don't conquer that voice, you don't stand a chance against anything external. The ocean can't beat you until your mind beats you first. And once you understand that, you start seeing every challenge differently, not as punishment, but as training. Training for the real enemy, the part of you that wants to quit long before you're actually done. I can tell you the exact night everything in me broke and rebuilt itself. It wasn't dramatic, no music, no spotlight, no heroic speech, just darkness, cold, and the kind of exhaustion that makes you doubt whether you're even real anymore. During Hell Week, time stops making sense, minutes stretch into hours, and your thoughts turn into hallucinations. You start seeing things in the waves, hearing voices that aren't there, and questioning whether you're actually awake or trapped inside some nightmare that won't end. That night, sometime around 3 in the morning, my body finally shut down on me. Or at least that's what my mind wanted me to believe. We were doing surf torture, locked arm in arm with my boat crew, waves crashing over our heads like the ocean was trying to erase us. The water was cold enough to make your bones ache. My jaw chattered so violently, it felt like my teeth would crack. Every few seconds, a wave would hit, and we'd all get pulled under for just long enough to panic before resurfacing. And somewhere in the middle of that misery, I started hallucinating. I swore I saw a warm house with lights on just beyond the beach. I swore I heard my mother's voice telling me to come inside. That's what exhaustion does. It takes your deepest desires, warmth, rest, safety, and paints them into the darkness like they're real. My vision started tunneling, my fingers went numb. I felt like my soul was being vacuumed out of my body. And then the same old voice, that enemy from my earlier life, crept in again. You can't keep doing this. You're done. You've proved enough. Just stand up, ring the bell, and it'll all be over. For a moment, I believed it. I believed I was actually at my limit. But right then, one of the instructors walked by with a flashlight and shined it directly in my face. "Still with us, John?" he yelled. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure. He leaned in and said something I'll never forget. "Your mind is lying to you. It always will. Decide who runs this mission, you or that voice." That was the moment everything changed. Not because it got easier, because it didn't. The cold didn't disappear. The waves didn't soften. My body didn't magically recharge, but something inside me snapped into place, like a locked door suddenly swinging open. I realized the voice wasn't truth. It was a survival reflex, a fear mechanism, a programmed response meant to keep me from discomfort, not danger. And the more I listened to it, the more power it gained. But if I pushed through, even for one more second, I took that power back. So I made a decision not to finish Hell Week, not to finish the night, not even to last another hour. I made the smallest commitment I could muster, survived the next wave, one wave, that was it. When the cold hit, I told myself, just one more. When the shaking got violent, one more. Every time that internal enemy tried to negotiate, I answered with a micro commitment so small it couldn't scare me. And slowly, something remarkable happened. The fear didn't vanish, but it stopped controlling me. The suffering didn't end, but it stopped owning me. I learned the core truth that would shape the rest of my life. Micro commitments combined with controlled suffering create unstoppable follow-through. That night became my turning point. Once I proved to myself that I could outlast one wave, I realized I could outlast 10. Once I could outlast 10, I could outlast the hour. Once I outlasted the hour, I knew I could finish the night. And when the sun finally rose, when the sky lit up with that dull gray light, I felt something I had never felt before, a sense of certainty, not hope, not motivation, certainty. The belief that quitting was no longer an option I would entertain. That voice could scream, whisper, negotiate, lie, but I wouldn't obey it again. What I learned in the dark that night is the foundation for everything I teach now. And in the next chapter, I'm going to break down how you take that same principle, micro commitments and controlled suffering, and turn it into a system you can use every day of your life. Because the truth is simple. If you master the small battles, the big ones can't break you. Most people never finish what they start because they operate like civilians. Vague goals, vague plans, vague standards. In the teams, that mindset would get you killed. In life, it kills your potential. So when people ask me, John, what's the system you still use today? I give them the same framework that kept me alive in the field and got me through every brutal training evolution. It's not motivational. It's not inspirational. It's structural. And once you understand it, finishing becomes your default, not a rare achievement you celebrate once a year. It all starts with target lock. In special operations, you never walk onto a battlefield without knowing the exact target, the precise building, the precise room, the precise objective inside that room. If even one detail is unclear, the mission falls apart. The same thing happens in your daily life. You say you want to get in shape, start a business, fix your finances, but those aren't targets. Those are clouds. Clouds change shape, clouds drift. A real target is specific and undeniable. When I trained for Budes, my target lock wasn't get in good shape. It was run 4 miles on sand in under 32 minutes every time. That level of clarity leaves no room for negotiation. If you don't define your target with precision, your mind will create loopholes big enough to escape through. And when things get hard, you'll take the escape every time. Once the target is locked, the next phase kicks in, segment and attack. Every overwhelming mission becomes manageable when you break it down into micro objectives. During a long-range movement in training, we had to cover miles with heavy gear across terrain that felt like it hated us. If you focus on the finish line, you go insane. So we broke it down to the next ridge line, then the next tree line, then the next patch of dirt. Attack, reset, attack, reset. That rhythm turns impossible into inevitable. In your life, it's the same idea. Don't focus on losing 30 pounds. Focus on executing today's workout. Don't focus on building $1 million business. Focus on completing the 2 tasks you committed to this morning. You attack what's in front of you, not the entire mountain. But none of that matters if you don't have ruthless consistency. In the teams, standards weren't optional. They weren't based on feelings. They weren't adjusted because someone was tired. One standard every day. That's how you build an identity strong enough to withstand pressure. There were days when I couldn't feel my hands, when my legs felt like concrete, and when my brain was screaming for rest, but I still hit the standard, not perfectly, not gracefully, but consistently. And consistency isn't about intensity, it's about frequency. You don't need to move fast, you just need to refuse to stop. Then there's the pain protocol. This is where civilians fall apart. You feel discomfort and assume it's a sign to stop. In the teams, discomfort wasn't a stop sign, it was information. It told you where the weak points were. It told you where you needed to grow. I remember one night in SQT, carrying a pack so heavy, my shoulders were bleeding through my shirt. Every step hurt, but I reframed the pain. This is the cost. This is the currency you pay for strength. Once you accept that growth requires discomfort, you stop fighting it and start using it. Pain becomes fuel, not fear. Finally, you need accountability without emotion. In the military, nobody cared how you felt. If the mission required action, you acted. No explanations, no excuses. Feelings are weather systems. They change by the hour. Accountability is the anchor. When I didn't want to hit a runtime, I hit it anyway. When I didn't want to wake up early, I woke up anyway. Emotional neutrality is the secret weapon of follow-through. When you detach your actions from your emotions, you become unstoppable. This system isn't theoretical. It's the same structure that carried me through missions where the margin for error was razor thin, and the same structure I still use today to finish every personal goal I set. When you lock the target, break it into pieces, execute daily standards, embrace the pain, and remove emotion from accountability, something shifts. You stop thinking like someone who tries, and you start thinking like someone who finishes every time. I learned something strange after leaving the teams. The civilian world is its own kind of battleground, and most people are losing without even realizing they're in a fight. Not because they're weak and not because they lack potential, but because the environment they live in rewards drift. Out there, nobody's checking your gear. Nobody's holding you to a standard. Nobody's watching the clock to make sure you're ready when you said you'd be ready. You can hit snooze, skip workouts, avoid hard conversations, abandon goals, and nothing explodes. Nothing punishes you immediately, but over time, the casualties pile up. Confidence, discipline, health, opportunity. And the saddest part is that people think this slow collapse is normal. When I transitioned out of the Navy, I met people who had dreams just as big as anything we trained for in the teams, losing weight, starting businesses, breaking addictions, mastering skills, but they kept failing for one simple reason. They treated their lives like suggestions instead of missions. In the military, you don't try to complete an objective, you complete it. In civilian life, trying has become a lifestyle. People try to eat better, they try to save money, they try to stay consistent. Trying is just a prettier word for waiting until it gets hard and then stopping. Take losing weight. I've coached men who convinced themselves they were broken because they couldn't stay committed, but they weren't broken. They were undisciplined. And discipline isn't a personality trait, it's a system. In the teams, if we wanted to get faster, we didn't rely on motivation. We created standards, run times, distances, paces. We held each other accountable. There was no debate, no negotiation. When civilians approach weight loss, they wait until they feel ready. That's the equivalent of waiting until you feel energized to run through enemy fire. You act because the mission demands it, not because the emotions align. When one guy I coached finally embraced that mindset, 10,000 daily steps, 2 scheduled workouts a week, no sugar Monday, Friday, he lost 30 pounds in 3 months, not because he found the perfect diet, because he found a standard. Building a business is the same battlefield with different terrain. Entrepreneurs fail because they treat action like an optional exercise. In the teams, if your comms break, you fix them now. If you miss a checkpoint, you adjust now. In business, people see a problem and tell themselves they'll deal with it when the time is right. That's drift. Drift kills missions. I remember talking to a guy who'd been planning his business for 5 years. He had ideas, notebooks, courses, everything except execution. I told him the same thing I tell every civilian entrepreneur: action is your extraction plan. Planning gets you ready. Execution gets you home. Addiction is one of the toughest civilian enemies, and I've seen men fight it the same way we fought through Hell Week. One of my closest friends came to me after years of battling alcohol. He told me he kept quitting for a week and then falling back because life felt overwhelming. I taught him the same principle that saved me in the surf: micro commitments, 1 hour, one situation, one decision. He stopped trying to quit forever and focused on getting through the next wave. 3 months later, he was sober. Not because of willpower, because he stopped letting the entire mountain crush him at once. Mastery works the same way. Civilians think skill is built through inspiration, through bursts of energy, but mastery is built through quiet, consistent repetition, the kind that feels almost invisible. When I was learning to shoot long range, I didn't get better through hype. I got better by drilling the fundamentals: breath, trigger control, sight alignment, hundreds of reps that felt mundane. You want to learn guitar, coding, cooking, anything? You have to embrace the boredom. Boredom is the doorway to mastery, and most people never walk through it because they mistake boredom for failure. The truth is, every civilian struggle mirrors a battlefield principle. Weight loss is about standards. Business is about execution. Addiction is about micro commitments. Mastery is about repetition, and all of them collapse for the same reason: people let their emotions vote. In the teams, emotions never had a vote, only the mission did. But there's something deeper, one principle that sits above all of this, one secret that every SEAL knows but few civilians ever learn. And in the next chapter, I'm going to tell you exactly what it is. It's the reason the strongest people finish what they start long after others have quit. The reason a mission gets completed even when every man is exhausted. The reason I didn't ring out. And once you understand it, everything in your life will change. There's one truth I didn't understand until years after Hell Week. One truth that separates the people who finish what they start from the people who live their entire lives in a loop of almosts. And it has nothing to do with motivation, talent, luck, or even discipline in the way most people think about it. Finishing what you start is an identity. It's who you become when you decide that quitting is no longer part of your vocabulary. You don't finish tasks. You finish the person you said you would be. Most people think success is a checklist. They think it's about completing workouts, hitting deadlines, keeping promises. But checklists fall apart the moment you get tired. Motivational videos fade the moment life punches you in the mouth. Willpower evaporates when the world puts weight on your shoulders. That's why civilians fall into cycles of starting strong and dying out. They're trying to use temporary tools for permanent battles. You cannot complete meaningful missions with tools that collapse under pressure. Identity doesn't collapse. That night in the surf, when the waves were slapping us like the ocean wanted us dead, and my mind was feeding me lies one after another, something permanent shifted. It wasn't pride. It wasn't heroism. It wasn't even discipline in the traditional sense. It was identity. I decided, not hoped, not wished, not tried, decided that I was no longer the man who negotiates with weakness. I was no longer the man who quit races growing up, who backed out when things got uncomfortable, who lied to himself in private and paid the price later. I became the kind of man who finishes, not because it's easy, but because that's who he is. There was a moment years later on deployment that brought this lesson back to the surface. We were moving at night, a long insertion in full gear, and one of my teammates twisted his knee badly. The smart move, the comfortable move, would have been to call for extraction and end the mission. But that wasn't his identity. I watched him tighten his straps, grit his teeth, and keep moving, step by agonizing step. Nobody told him to. Nobody ordered him. He didn't need motivation. He didn't need cheering. He simply refused to break the identity he had built. And because he refused to quit, the rest of us didn't either. We finished the op. We made it home. And that night, I realized something profound. Identity is contagious. When you become someone who finishes, you give the people around you permission to rise too. And that's what I want for you. Not hype, not temporary fire, identity. You've spent most of your life believing finishing is an achievement. It's not. It's a reflection, a mirror held up to the deepest part of you. When you look in that mirror, you're either the kind of person who completes the mission or the kind of person who creates excuses so convincing you start believing them yourself. But here's the part most people never hear. You can change that identity at any moment. You can draw a line in the sand today, right now, and decide that from this point forward, you are someone who finishes, someone who sees things through, someone whose future self can trust their present self. And you don't do that by making a massive promise you can't keep. You do it by choosing one mission, just one. One thing you've avoided, postponed, quit, or talked yourself out of. One mission you will not abandon this time. It doesn't matter if it's losing 5 pounds, reading a book every night, building a habit, or saving money. Choose it, commit to it, lock onto it the way we locked onto targets in the field, with clarity, precision, and zero negotiation. And then act like the person who finishes, even when your feelings scream otherwise. Identity is built one decision at a time, one micro commitment at a time, one refusal to back down at a time. And once that identity takes root, you won't need motivation ever again. Finishing will become your instinct. Now it's your turn. Pick your mission, say it out loud, write it in the comments, declare it, and then live it. Because the day you refuse to quit is the day your entire life changes.